One of the most noticeable features of the moon is that it looks slightly different each day than from the day before. Sometimes the moon is a large sphere hanging in the sky, while other times there's only a small sliver of white. Today, as we continue to look at the moon, we will study its phases and draw a diagram of them. For the moon to cycle through all its phases, it takes 29.5 days. As the moon completes one rotation on its axis, it is also revolving around the Earth. The revolution, or the orbit, of the moon around the Earth takes the same amount of time as the moon completing one rotation. This causes us, here on Earth, to only see one side of the moon. It is also important to note that because the moon and the Earth are both moving around the sun, the moon only takes 27.3 days to complete a full orbit around the Earth, but another 2.2 days to go from one phase to the same phase approximately a month later. Like any sphere in our solar system, only half of the moon is lit up by the sun at a time. The rest of the moon is dark. If you have a globe, a ball, or something else that is round, and you shine a light at the object in a darkish room, you can see how this works. The light will only shine on one side of the object at a time. Similarly, half of the moon is always lit up while the other half remains in shadow. As the moon moves around the Earth, the sun lights up different sides of the moon, causing us to see the lunar phases. To help us understand the phases of the moon in the northern hemisphere, let's grab some pencils and paper and make a diagram. In the center of your page, draw the Earth. Off to the right, let's imagine the sun, and we can draw some lines to represent the sun's light. Since the sunlight is coming from here in our picture, we can put the left side of the Earth into shadow to show the night. Draw a small circle on the side of Earth that the sun is on. Shade the half of the moon that is facing the Earth black and leave the other side white. For someone standing on Earth, it would appear that there is no moon in the sky, because the side of the moon facing Earth is dark. We will represent our view from Earth in this larger circle. This stage is called new moon. Let's draw another moon above and to the left of the first one. Again, the side facing away from the sun is dark. However, from our perspective on Earth, we can now see a little bit of the light side. The moon has a crescent shape, so we call it waxing crescent. The word waxing refers to how the light side of the moon is growing larger. The next phase of the moon is called first quarter. At this point, it looks like the moon is cut in half, and the moon has completed a quarter of its orbit around the Earth. Next comes waxing gibbous. We can now draw the moon so that only a sliver of the moon is dark, while the rest remains white. Now the moon looks almost full. With the next phase, called full moon, the moon looks large, bright, and circular in the sky. As you can see from the diagram, it is now the side of the moon that faces away from the Earth that is completely in the shadow. The following phase is called waning gibbous, since the white area of the moon is disappearing. After this comes the phase last quarter, or third quarter, in which the moon is again, from our perspective, half in darkness and half illuminated by the sun. Finally, the moon appears as a crescent in the sky, called Waning Crescent, and once all of the white portion of the moon has disappeared after almost a month, the cycle starts again with the next new moon. Now, it is important to note that here we drew the phases of the moon in the northern hemisphere. In our diagram, as the new moon turns to full moon, the light portion of the moon moves across the moon's surface from right to left. The moon is always in the same phase when looked at from anywhere on Earth at the same time. But in the southern hemisphere, when going from new moon to full moon, the light part of the moon goes from left to right, rather than from right to left. Certain phases of the moon also rise at different times. At new moon, the moon rises around sunrise in the east and sets around sunset in the west, but at full moon, the moon rises at sunset and sets at sunrise. Now that you've learned a bit about the phases of the moon, it is time to look into the sky and see if you can find the moon and figure out which phase it's in tonight.
Bingo